Hello, in this video I want to show you how you can get started with Flowcode version 11. When you first start Flowcode 11, you're presented with a screen like this, and you've got a couple of choices. You can either open a previous project or you can select new project. If you select new project, you can go to the three different bits of software: embedded, web developer or PC developer, and you can just click on those and get a blank project screen, or you've got some quick start options here. Now we've got a bit of hardware, so connected to the computer is this eBlocks 3 development system, in this case an Arduino Mega system, and Flowcode knows that the hardware is connected, so you can either open a blank embedded project, or you can get Flowcode to detect the configuration of your boards and you can load a project like that, or you can open an example. Let's just look at what happens if you take the auto detect option. If you take that option, Flowcode knows what hardware you've got. So in this case I've got an upstream Arduino Mega, I've got a combo board, I've got an analog board there, and I've got a temperature and humidity sensor there. And so Flowcode lists those boards for me, and if I say finish, it then gives me the option in the software to load those boards onto the panel. So here it asks me which of those objects do I want, and I can use these switches. So the combo board is on port A and B, temperature humidity port D, analog sensor on port F, and then there's some internal options. So you can choose whether you want the graphical display shown, whether you want the UART, the Bluetooth and the Wi-Fi shown. And in this case what we'll do is we'll say we want the basic boards and the graphical display, and we'll press OK. And what Flowcode will do is it will assemble those components onto the panel for me, all pre-configured. So it saves you a step in terms of configuring the connections and the settings on the boards, and that's a major area of confusion for those who are starting out in terms of programming. So here's the panel. You can see I've got all the boards. It's not arranged very well, so what I might do is I might rearrange my panel a little bit more like this before I start programming. Let's move those up a bit. So you might do something like that, and then you can start to assemble your programs with whatever code that you want. So that's one option that's open to you. Let's just look at the other option. So I go File, New Project, and that is we can open an example. Now all of the examples for the Matrix courses are now available inside Flowcode itself. So for example, we have a course called Introduction to Microcontrollers, and in there is a project called First Program, and we have examples for Arduino, ESP and PIC. And so you select the first program, and I don't want to save the previous program I was working on, and what Flowcode will then do is it will load that program for you. So it's great to have all of those examples inside the Flowcode program. Okay, so let's look at what this program does. Let's just shrink the hardware a little bit. So this is Flowcode, and there are different parts of the screen that we need to explain. The first part is the panel, and the panel is where you put your components, and you can see there that what I've got is a bunch of LEDs, and the LEDs are connected to port B, and I can change the connections there just by clicking on that little chip and making the appropriate connections. And there are lots of properties like the number of LEDs, so you can change that to just one LED for example, and there are colors and styles whether they're round or square or so on. So the panel is effectively your hardware. Now this area is where you create your flowchart program, and each of these icons has some properties, and you can enter different numbers and properties there, and you assemble your program by dragging these icons in from the Project Explorer here, or we'll just get rid of that one. You can access the same commands here if you select command icons. So on the flowchart program, you're able to have inputs, outputs, delays, decisions, switches, and other constructs here which are available under the command icons. Just going back to the components, what you're able to do is you're able to drag onto the panel a huge range of different components which are available under the component libraries. So I've just dragged on a little push button, and again you can see its connections, you can see its properties, whether it's latching or push to make and so on. And in those libraries there's a huge range of different types of parts, so lots of different inputs, switches and chips, lots of outputs, D2A converters, digital potentiometers, buzzers, LEDs, LED arrays, motors and so on. A huge range of different types of display, both simple 7-segment LCD and full graphical displays. Lots of display plugins for driving touchscreens, a huge range of sensors of all different types. Then there's some different storage systems and real-time clocks, lots of mathematical operators, some DSP operators, a huge range of comms, everything from I2C to Zigbee, and some other more niche components that you can see there. So you basically find a component, drag it onto the panel, configure it, and when you've done that, if we look at a display, for example, if we just put any old display on there for now, once the display comes up, in the Project Explorer, you can look at all of the hardware macros or the subroutines that are available to allow you to control your display. And Flowcode has thousands and thousands of pre-written mini programs or subroutines that allow you to control all sorts of different bits of hardware. Okay. The other thing you can do is, some people like to use flowcharts, other people like to use blocks, and what you're able to do is you're able to program in different styles, if you like. So what we can do is we can look at this in terms of the pseudocode, which is like basic, or we can look at it in flowcharts, or we can look at it as blocks, and you can switch between these. And these work in simulation, but also in construction. So if you want to add something to the program in either pseudocode or blocks, as you wish, you just drag and drop into the appropriate workspace. So inside Flowcode there is a debug or simulation system. So what you're able to do is you're able to simulate your program and see the effects on the panel or the electronic system, but also you're able to see the flowchart or pseudocode or block, and you're able to see which command is being executed at any one time. And you're able to speed that up or slow it down as you wish. And the simulation is a really good tool for understanding how programs work and also for debugging your system. Once you're happy with your program, what you do is you go onto the Build tab, you select the hardware, and you make sure that the programmer port is set up for the right USB port, and then you press the compile button, and it wants to save it somewhere, so we'll save that. And if you press the compile to chip button, it first of all compiles it, and then it sends the program to the device. And if we've done it properly, then as you can see, it's quite bright in here. We now have a flashing LED on port B, just as you saw in the simulation. So the compilation is really simple. It's a single button press, and you can look at the C code there if you want to. So if you're curious about how these things work at a lower level, you can get access to the C code that's made and so on. Okay, that's a brief introduction to Flowcode version 11. I hope you enjoy using it, and thank you for watching.